You probably already know if you started a cannabis brand 5 years ago, you'd have 6 figures in monthly revenue. You'd be able to travel where you want, be able to drive the cars you want. However, you probably didn't start it 5 years ago. So today, you start your brand now, within the next 5 years or less, you'll be able to live this type of life, have the freedom, have the choices, have the ability to travel while you're working, while your business is actually running, making revenue, whether you're in a time zone 12 hours away or in your hometown, doesn't matter. See, building your THCA brand is very similar. However, it's also very different than building a licensed cannabis brand. So today, we're gonna go over what a THCA business is, how you can get started, and how you can scale. If you don't know me yet, I'm Chris. I've been in wholesale cannabis since 2004, and I've also held one of California's earliest state distribution licenses since 2017. I also built and sold a licensed cultivation facility in downtown LA that I scaled to $3 million annually before starting my brand, Zotix, in 2022. Following that up, I started my second brand, Lowski, Fire Indoor for the Low, since 2024, providing high quality flower at affordable rates. Today, I teach cannabis entrepreneurs how to hit $100,000 months without owning a license. So what is a THCA business? So in my other videos, I explain what THCA is and how the similarities between cannabis and hemp are very small, and it really comes down to the testing percentages and when it gets tested, what the THCA levels are, what the actual Delta-9 THC levels are, and then whether or not the state that you're operating in looks at those levels as a total THC or only Delta-9. If it only looks at Delta-9, you're in the clear. If it looks at total THC, most likely it's their way of banning it in that state. So federal law made this legal in 2018 with the Farm Bill, and it didn't really proliferate until about 2022, 23, 24, when a lot of these companies started realizing the way that the law was written with the THCA percentages in there meant that all flower, all weed is technically THCA. It depends when you test it, and it depends how you test it. There's certain tests where they heat up the bud and that automatically decarboxylates it, so that kind of disqualifies it. And a good lawyer will dispute that in court if they use those type of tests. So back to what a THCA business is, it's ultimately providing quality. And if you're a brand, you wanna be testing your products, you wanna make sure you're having good quality products going out to your customers. And so that's one of the most important things I gotta stress if you are launching a THCA brand or a company or business. The testing is not as stringent as some of the state laws for licensed cannabis is. So do your customers a favor, do your brand a favor, go the extra mile, do the testing, do it on every batch. Don't just try to blanket test and throw those same strains in under the same tests. So these are all ways that you can ensure that your THCA brand is gonna stay quality and also be safe for your consumers to consume. So THCA, there's certain states that are really just opening the doors, opening the floodgates, and they're letting businesses start there, such as smoke shops with a basic business license, opening up pretty much in whatever commercial location they find. And that's in contrast to the state licensed cannabis programs. They'll give you a certain neighborhood you can only pick commercial real estate in to operate the licensed cannabis business in, which drives up rents, which lowers your options of where you can get these commercial locations. And it's a lot of hoops to jump through. So on the hemp side, the THCA side, it's not as strict on a state level. However, the federal law you still have to abide by on the hemp side of things, which dive into the Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill, and do your own research. I've put other videos out talking about this. However, you're gonna be starting your business under this framework, the 2018 Farm Bill. So where I see a lot of the THCA business happening is either on the supply side or the retail side. And then there's obviously the brand. So the supply side is gonna be things such as cultivation. You're growing hemp, you're growing THCA flower. That could be either outdoor or indoor, it doesn't matter. The next phase would be manufacturing. Manufacturing is where you're taking the raw materials, whether that's buds, flowers, trim, shake, doesn't matter. You're gonna be processing that into something different. And even if it's just flower, you're gonna be taking those buds of flower, packaging them into flower packaging, testing it, and sending it on its way to either your distribution or maybe you're doing direct to consumer sales online. So as a brand, you'd be working with these manufacturers to produce your products, whether that's pre-rolls, just flower, whether it's vapes, infused pre-rolls, gummies, drinks. So that's the manufacturer's position. They're gonna be taking the raw materials and converting it into the consumer packaged goods, CPGs. After that, you're gonna have a distro. And the hemp distribution companies, THCA distribution companies, work slightly different than the cannabis distribution companies. So I'm gonna stay away from explaining how the cannabis side of things work just to avoid confusion. Instead, I'm really gonna focus on the hemp side of things in this video. I have other videos explaining how the licensed supply chain works in certain states such as California and New York. But today we're just gonna cover the federal hemp laws. And if your individual state bans it, then you have to go by state law. State law will trump federal law. No pun intended by the Trump term. Anyway, with California, for instance, they just banned the sale of all smokable hemp. However, you can still produce it here. So you can grow it in California, you can manufacture it in California, you can even be a distro in California. However, you just can't sell it to California smoke shops, who are in turn gonna sell it to California residents. And they did this to basically keep a stranglehold on the licensed cannabis side of things and not let the hemp side cut into the licensed cannabis tax revenue. So this will be a theme that you'll see play out in other states, especially if they haven't done it yet. Texas tried banning it just recently and the governor overturned that, he vetoed it. So the THCA program is alive and kicking in Texas. However, a lot of us really thought it was getting down to the wire. Everyone was thinking it was just gonna get shut down completely. So that's the wild card. We can't control that. It can happen in a flash overnight. And this is one of the reasons why it makes so much sense to have a presence in the licensed cannabis space, especially in California or New York, as well as doing a THCA component to be able to sell direct to consumer online, to be able to sell in smoke shops in the states that do allow it. And ideally, if you can get a distro deal that services a wide amount of these smoke shops and you're hitting the right price points, you have the right quality, you have the right branding, this could be a huge game changer for you, because getting it into the hands of the right distro will potentially get your product into hundreds, if not thousands of stores. So obviously there's other supply chain issues that go with that. You can't just go from 0 to 1,000 stores. You need to basically ramp up to that and build out your foundation properly. And we'll touch on a few of those things today. However, we're talking about starting a multi-million-dollar business here. I can't go over everything you need to know in one video. And that being said, I can't go over everything you need to know in all these YouTube videos, and you're not gonna see them in the right order, the right space, or you might not even know about this one or that one. So if you're really serious about this, join my free school community. I put extra information there, and then you can even book a call with me in the link below, and we can go over your options as far as rolling out your brand, potentially having my company build your brand for you, getting into licensed stores or getting into the hemp market for you, and save you a lot of the hiccups, the setbacks, the learning curve, and we'll teach you along the way how to run it, how to operate it, how to scale it, how to stay profitable. So if that's something you're interested in, click the link below, book a call with me, we'll get on the phone and we'll go over your situation, see if it makes sense. So let's get into how to roll this out, how to set it up. So first off, you're gonna need to identify, and I'm gonna be talking from the perspective of owning a brand, because I don't wanna get into setting up a grow setting up manufacturing facilities, setting up distribution, or setting up retail. If you want to do those things, you're gonna have to either find the right mentors for that, learn the hard way, or potentially partner with some people that already have those operations in place. However, being on the production side of things for many years here in California, owning multiple distribution licenses, type 6 manufacturing license, as well as a licensed indoor cultivation facility, I found that the brand is really where the profit is made. And until you get your brand up to a certain level, that's when you want to start thinking about buying the supply chain, opening and grow, setting up your manufacturing, things like that. But what so many people have done, both in the licensed cannabis space and the hemp space, is jump in by buying the infrastructure first, building the infrastructure first. And it's gonna cost you literally upwards of millions of dollars to really do it right. And so you could literally take that, even just half that, 500,000, and you would have an amazing, amazing brand rolled out with marketing in place and utilizing supply chain partners, and then building up your brand's profitability, getting the footprint out there, building up your marketing, focusing on that. And once your brand is to a certain stage, that's when you would take that money and actually buy the supply chain. So I feel like it's backwards to buy the supply chain first before you have proof of concept, before your brand's actually established and profitable. And instead, don't give yourself that burden of running these facilities to try to make a profit, because that's the other thing with these facilities. It's not easy to make a profit as a supply chain partner. You need to really be at the top of the top. There's a lot of competition out there, and there's really no differentiation other than price. So obviously you have your quality production, and everyone's gonna hit a certain quality standard over time. They're gonna, the market's gonna demand it. So say with pre-roll manufacturers, if this guy over here makes loose pre-rolls at the bottom by the cone, but these guys make really nice ones, nice and tight all the way through, consistent, and they're charging almost the same price, it's a no-brainer. You're gonna go with the guys that make them very consistent. But what it's gonna cause is the guys that are inconsistent, it's gonna have to up their game. And they're either gonna have to lower their price and up their game, or up their game and surpass them in quality and keep the price, about the same. So there's very little room for high profit margins. And when you have a lot of manufacturers getting into the space, they're gonna be driving costs down. So that's gonna really depend on economies of scale, which means how big is your warehouse? How big is your workforce? How many machines do you have? Do you have automated pre-roll machines? Can you do millions of pre-rolls a day or a week? Versus are you hand packing the pre-rolls with a knockbox? Your production scale is gonna be completely night and day different. So when you're talking about running a profitable supply chain business, in my opinion, it's an uphill battle. You're gonna be fighting your competition, who's gonna be driving the price to the bottom. It's gonna be a race to the bottom. And then you're gonna have to constantly be increasing your quality. And it's even at a situation where you might be, to keep your quality up, have to squeeze your profit margins so thin that over time you're just gonna be thinking like, why am I even doing this? I could go open a smoothie stand and make more money than this and have less overhead, have less risks, XYZ. So that's why I really stress the brand first. Makes the most sense. You're gonna get your most profit out of the brand. You're gonna have the most flexibility. You're gonna have the least overhead. You're gonna have the least forward-facing compliance, because that's the beauty of working with supply chain partners. They're gonna be handling the bulk of your compliance for you, because they're the ones holding the licenses. They're the ones that have to report to the government. They're the ones that when an inspection happens, their door gets knocked on, not yours. So as the brand, there's just way more reasons to start your brand first, get it profitable, scale it, and then buy the supply chain, versus the opposite way. It just doesn't make sense. And for whatever reason, I really don't know why so many people jumped in buying licenses, buying supply chain functions, rather than starting their brand and focusing on their brand. They all started these facilities and then started the brand as an afterthought. So enough on that. Setting up your THCA business as a brand, that's what we're gonna be focusing on here. You're gonna start by, obviously you need your entity. You need a a corporation or an LLC, you need something other than yourself. Do not do this under a sole proprietorship, no matter what. Do not run a business under sole proprietorship. You're not going to be able to write off nearly as many expenses. You're going to pay about 10x the amount in taxes if you do it as a sole proprietorship versus doing it as a LLC, a corp, a C corp, S corp. Really doesn't matter at that point. You're going to be able to leverage your expenses, whereas as a sole proprietorship, you won't. So it's an easy way to start it with a sole proprietorship. You can walk into the bank and just start your business account, but do not do that. There's no reason to do that. You're literally gonna be throwing 10x of your money away in the following years when you pay taxes, and you get zero benefit other than the ease of setting up your bank account that day. So don't be lazy. Set up a proper entity, an LLC, S corp, C corp, and have your accountant. If your accountant doesn't do it for you, at least consult with your accountant, with your CPA. Ask them what the best structure is for you. Yeah, the accountant might charge a little bit to set it up, but they're gonna set it up properly versus you setting it up for free or low cost, selecting the wrong formats and the wrong technical details, and then your accountant's gonna have to charge you anyway to go back through, revamp it, resubmit it, etc. So it's really important to have a good CPA, and I can't stress that enough in any business you're gonna be in, whether that's hemp, cannabis, or selling cars. It doesn't matter. You wanna have a good CPA and also a good bookkeeper. So getting your business structure in place is important. If you have any partners, be sure that you guys clearly map out who's responsible for what, whether that be financial, whether that be work responsibilities, whether that be department functions. You know, if one guy's gonna be in charge of sales, one guy's gonna be in charge of marketing, one guy's gonna be in charge of operations. So you wanna clearly identify these. You wanna pick partners that have contrasting things that they can bring to the table. You don't want to have a team of partners and they're all good at one thing, but they lack in these other departments. So you want to have some overlap. If you are going to have partners, you want them to all bring something special to the table. I personally don't have partners in my brand. I have some sweat equity partners that have earned equity in the brand based off of the years of dedication they've put in. However, when it comes to capital contributions, they're not responsible for that. When it comes to major decisions, I definitely consult with them out of respect of their opinion, but there's nothing in writing or anything where they're obligated to it. I just give them that benefit. However, by not having partners, you can make those ultimate decisions. You can go with your gut instinct. You can pull the trigger now when you know it needs to happen and not have to go sit here and convince your other 50% half on why this needs to happen, why you need to change genetics, why you need to fire this person, why you need to expand here, why you need to shut down over here. You literally just go with your gut. You know what you need to do and you do it. And so that's the beauty of not having partners. But with everything in life, there's pros and cons. A plus side to having partners, especially if they're complementary to each other and they all bring something different to the table, that's your best situation. Because me personally, I'm great at marketing, branding, the big term vision, the long term vision, seeing where we're at, where we're headed, what we got to do to get there. However, my other partner, Angel, he handles all the operations. So he takes my vision, the points of what we're doing, what we're focusing on, and he maps those out into, okay, how do we achieve this step by step? What do we got to do from today till however long it works to come out? So by us having this synergy, it allows me to do what I'm good at, and then he takes what I knock out and he puts his twist on it, and now he systematizes that and turns it into the operations, which then brings it into reality. So if we were both great visionaries and we were both, traveling around doing marketing, who's gonna handle the operations, right? So that's why you need someone complementary to each other, and vice versa, where they're not gonna be angry like, well, why is Chris always doing this? Why am I always stuck here doing this and this? And it's not that case, because he enjoys doing what he does and I enjoy doing what I do. And there's no battle for somebody to be like, hey, I should be doing this instead of you, or something like that. So good partners is key. If you do have partners, track your expenses properly And this is super, super important just to maintain your general trust between your partnership. However, it's also super important for your tax liabilities at the end of the year. Also super important for keeping proper books, proper records. Don't cut those corners. It's easy to, because especially if you're coming from the streets doing breakdown sales or even just selling packs in the streets, it's very frowned upon to keep proper records and to keep explicit records. However, like I said, we're running a real business here. It's incorporated, it's an LLC, it's an S Corp, C Corp, doesn't matter. You need to keep your proper books. You need to keep your expenses, your cost of goods, your profit margins, your payroll costs, your taxes. All this stuff needs to be properly documented. And I know firsthand from just doing sales in the streets for so many years that when it came to that, it felt weird. It felt weird to document this stuff. It felt like I'm, in a way you're like, yo, am I snitching on myself by keeping records? And these records are super important, especially for historical data, forecasting, making decisions even more so. And that's what I've had to learn is when you make decisions with the right data, you can make these decisions without having that second guessing of yourself. And the data paints the picture. And it's like, literally, if you're driving down the road and you see a stop sign, are you gonna hit the gas and go? No, you're gonna hit stop, you're gonna go. You're gonna stop at the stop sign. And it's the same thing with having accurate data, is it tells you how to maneuver. It's gonna say, okay, go fast here, slow down, figure out what's going on over here, fix this over here. So this data is important. And then even more so, historical data. So you could go back and see, well, what was Christmas time like last year? What was it like the year before? What should I expect for this Christmas time? So this historical data is also important. And these are a lot of things that go overlooked until you actually need it. And then by the time you actually need it, now you're scrambling to put this into place, figure it out, backtrack all these previous years of records. It's just a headache. And I've been through that too. And so I'm telling you this from straight up experience. Start your business the proper way, keep the proper records, have your agreements in place, have your contracts lined up, have a proper file storage system. I like to use iCloud and have all my documents on there, so that way if I need it on my phone, it's synced to my computer, my phone, the cloud, it's backed up. So it's very important to set this up properly. Next, okay, we got the business structure out of place, that's dialed in, you got your partnership set up properly. Maybe you're a single business owner, you don't have a partnership, however that situation is. Next is gonna be figuring out your supply chain. And your supply chain is where you're gonna be getting your raw materials from, where you're gonna be having those raw materials processed, whether that be packaging, turning them into pre-rolls, filling up vapes, doing your compliance testing. So you need these supply chain partners in place. So that's what happens next, is getting your supply chain partnership set up. And this is gonna be dependent on your product development. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, backing up. You wanna understand what products your brand is gonna be pushing. Is it gonna just be flower? Is it gonna be pre-rolls? Is it gonna be vapes? Is it gonna be gummies? And it doesn't matter what it is, it just matters that you have every last detail mapped out. What are the ingredients? If you're doing gummies, are they distillate gummies? Are they live resin gummies? Are they hash rosin solventless gummies? If you're doing drinks, are they in cans? Are they in bottles? Is it a drink mix? Like, you need every detail mapped out. You need the formulation mapped out. You need to understand, okay, if I'm making drinks, this is how many milligrams of active ingredient is going into this drink. So that means that 1 liter of distillate is gonna make me this many drinks. So you can work your cost of goods back. So you need to understand your product development in detail. And I recommend when starting, only start with 1, maybe 2 different products, because we all look at a pre-roll, we open up a case, we open up a bag of flour, and we don't think about everything that went into it. We don't think about, okay, as a pre-roll, we had to order these custom cones from India, let's say. So we needed to get those designs in, we needed to get that order placed, we needed to get the lead time for the production to happen, then we need to get it shipped back to America. Okay, so that's just for your empty pre-roll, right? Now you need packaging to put those pre-rolls in. Where's that coming from? Is it coming from China? Is it coming from America? What's your price points on it? Now you need to actually connect to the actual supplier that's gonna make your packaging, get the proper exact dye lines from them, have your designer design your packaging to their dye lines from the producer. Don't get generic dye lines from anyone and then submit it to a producer because those dye lines might be slightly off. And then so you're either gonna have to redo your work because now they're gonna tell you to apply that design to their dye lines. So you might as well just start from the beginning, use your manufacturer's dye lines who's gonna be doing the printing, get your stuff designed, get it printed, get it delivered. And with a pre-roll, you're gonna have multiple pieces to your packaging. So you got your pre-roll cone, now you need something to put it in. So what is that gonna be? A glass jar, maybe a snapback case, maybe even a slide out cardboard case, maybe a metal tin, doesn't matter. However, it's another piece. It's another piece in the recipe. Now you gotta source that. You gotta find your best pricing. What's shipping on that? What's the lead time on that? Now you need to get those dye lines from that manufacturer for that piece of packaging, get your designer to design that. Then you need to submit those to your packaging manufacturers. They're gonna issue you proofs where they're gonna take your design, map it all out on their printing specs, get it all print ready, and then show you a proof. And you have to approve this proof. And by approving the proof, you are committing to paying for it, regardless of how it comes out after the proof. So if you can get physical samples, I always advise to do that because the smallest little detail, it might look fine on a computer screen, but when it's printed in physical form, it might be completely different. So that's that for the packaging. Next, you need your raw materials to go into those products. So let's keep using that example of pre-rolls. So are you using small buds? Are you using sugar trim? Are you using a combination of the two, maybe a ratio? So you're gonna wanna do R&D. You're gonna wanna see how does it taste just all sugar trim? How does it taste all flour? How does it taste with a 70-30 blend of 70% small buds, 30% sugar trim? How does it taste with a 70% sugar trim with 30% small buds? So this is considered your formulation. You need to identify how you want it to be produced. It doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter if you're using shake and buds or if you're using all buds and no shake. Doesn't matter. The formulation is the formulation and that's your product. And so that's part of what's gonna get your price point on the shelf to the consumer. It's also where the quality is gonna be determined. So what is your target demographic? What are they looking for? Are they looking for cheap products to just get them high? Or are they looking for quality, high quality taste? These are two different components here that you're gonna have to source completely different raw materials to hit these two different examples here. So getting your R&D for your product development dialed in, getting the formulation, every last detail, every single last detail. And then you wanna map these out. So if you join my community, I have a COGS calculator on our back end in the private sign-in page. And what that does is helps map out all of your raw materials, everything from packaging to your ingredients, your formulation, the weights, the wholesale price to the stores, and then what that's gonna equate to the consumer. So you can literally map out all these details, all these numbers, have the data, make informed decisions. And the best part is you're not gonna have to be an expert at Excel, you're not gonna have to do spreadsheets, you're not gonna have to make formulas, you're not gonna have to do math. Literally, my COGS calculator does it all for you. It even walks you through step by step, asks you the right questions. If you didn't provide it, it'll say, well, how much is your pre-roll cost? How many units did you buy? What's your tax on this? So it's gonna make sure nothing falls through the cracks so that your projections are accurate. And this is important, like I said, making decisions based off data it's like driving with GPS versus just driving with, your instinct and being like, well, maybe I should take a left here. You're gonna waste so much time and so much money if you don't have the proper data to make your proper decisions. So next, after you have your packaging figured out, your product formulation figured out, your numbers figured out, what your price points are gonna be both to the retailers as well to the consumer, now you're gonna figure out the rest of your supply chain. So are you gonna go just direct to consumer only? And if so, that means you gotta build out your website on a compliant platform that allows hemp, for instance, such as if you were to use Shopify, they're gonna shut your website down unless you pay them $2,500 a month to let them host it. So right there, unless there's a specific reason to use Shopify, I stay away from it for hemp. And so maybe that means you're gonna build it on WooCommerce, something that's more welcoming to that industry. So that's just your website. That doesn't count for your payment processor. Payment processor is gonna be the hardest part to build your direct-to-consumer website. A little tip you can do on that is set up Square, which will be an easy payment processor to set up. However, they're gonna shut you down as soon as you start getting some consistent volume going. And the reason I recommend to do that is because it's gonna do two things. It's gonna let you get started on a small scale with low cost, low risk, and just low moving parts to get that payment processor set up. All the other payment processors are a headache to set up. They're a pain in the ass. They're very hard to get approved by. They're gonna ask for, basically it's easier to get a credit card, it's easier to get a bank account, it's easier to get a driver's license than it is to get a payment processing account. Payment processing is such a headache, and it ultimately comes down to the guy in the underwriting office. Is he having a good day or a bad day? Does he want to sign off on this or not? Does he want to request more documentation? Does he want to see certain limits in your bank account in order for you to get approved for a certain amount of payment processing? All these different things. It's like, it's very, there's no rhyme or reason to it. These payment processors can shut you down in the blink of an eye. They can demand certain amount of minimums that they withhold. They can say, well, we want 20% of your total payment, your total monthly payment processing in reserve at all times. So let's say if you're running 100K of processing through your payment processor per month, and they want 20% reserve, that means you got to keep $20,000 in a secure account that they have access to at all times. So what's that going to do to your operating capital, your buying capital for raw materials, your employee payroll costs, etc.? So if you're just having to keep 20 grand just sitting there doing nothing just to give peace of mind to your payment processor, that's another hurdle you got to deal with, So I say to start with the Square first, because what that's going to do is give you proof of concept, help you work out any kinks, help you figure out any problems, how to optimize it. And then once it does get shut down, you want to have all of your payment processing documents ready to go, because you're going to need those Square statements, that track record of sales already, to help you get your next payment processor approved. So if you are able to keep your Square account in place, get that ramped up, get some marketing going and get some traffic driven there, get some sales consistently, and you want consistent sales. You don't want just some one month and then less the next month and then some more the next month. You want it to be a consistent increase in sales until they shut you down. And then take those statements, immediately apply for your next payment processor, if not before it gets shut down. Once you get some of that history going on your Square, just start applying to your payment processors. And so this is something that I help in our group guidance program. If you sign up for that, we handle as much of this for you. Obviously with payment processors, there's certain things that fall back on you, like what your credit score is, what your bank account looks like, what your bank history looks like, what your tax history looks like. So some of these things, even if we did it all for you, you still might not get approved if you don't have the proper paperwork or background in place. So these payment processors are literally the gatekeepers to this industry. So if you need some help with that, click the link below. We'll see if we can help you out. If not, do the Square situation for as long as it lasts. Keep proper records. Keep building up your presence in the financial sector, such as with good banking protocols, not letting your account go in the negative, making sure to pay all your fees, making sure to keep your reserve in there. What they also don't like to see is if 30,000 comes into the account, but you have 30,000 in expenses, really doesn't no good. It's basically a zero account. So they want to see if 30K comes in, your expenses are only 10K, and you're stacking up 20K a month out of all that. So that's like another key tip, is your payment processor is going to be your linchpin to your direct-to-consumer business. Now, it doesn't have to go direct-to-consumer. You can find a good distributor and get into retail stores. You can also do your own retail sales, where you go out to these smoke shops, reach out to them, go to conventions, and do it whatever way you can manage. Get your stuff in one shop at a time. However, that's bulky too, because now you have to manage that if you don't have a distributor, a single distributor that's hitting all those shops for you. So there's multiple ways to run this profitably, and there's multiple different strategies, and there's not one that's better than the other. It's more about what works best for you, your brand, your outlook, your journey, where you're trying to be at, what you're wanting to do. It's completely different. Also, your marketing. Say if you're a celebrity influencer, you're probably gonna have a better outcome by doing direct to consumer, and you're gonna conserve more of that profit margin for yourself versus putting it out into a distributor, just getting into smoke shops, wherever, just to sell it. So it also depends on how are you marketing it. What is your marketing pull that you have? Did you partner with someone who's a celebrity maybe? Are you your own celebrity? Do you have your own following on Instagram? You don't need to be a celebrity. It's just about, do you have a fan base, a loyal fan base that cares about what you're doing and wants to support you? Okay, so these are the key parts of setting it up. There's a lot more to get into, which I can't cover in this video. However, those are the key points. Once you get to that stage, it's pretty much, now you got it running. Now let's figure out how to scale it. And scaling is a very blanket term that's thrown around all the time, but scaling is an art, and it's about defining your strategy based off where you want to go. Are you trying to sell your business? Are you trying to keep it and pass it down to your family? Are you just trying to keep it running, just stack up as much profit, maybe shut it down in 10, 20 years? Who knows? There's no right or wrong answer, but it's having that understanding. What ultimately do you want to do? Are you building this up to sell it off and make a profit and just be done with it in 5 years? Or is it something like what Berner did with cookies, where he turned down these big buyout offers, stayed on, kept him as visionary, kept him as CEO, and doubled down, rolled the dice again, and see what happens. So again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's about what your objective is. And based on that objective is going to determine your strategy to scale. So if you're building your company up to just sell it in 5 years, you're really going to be focused on revenue and profit margin. You're going to be wanting to maximize your revenue as well as having a healthy profit margin, because no one's buying stuff off of just revenue anymore. They used to in the early days of cannabis. All they wanted to see was just revenue, and how much top line revenue you could get, and then they buy it based on a multiplier. It's very rare to happen these days, because people know that it's not these overinflated valuations. Like they were treating the cannabis industry like it's software, like it's tech. And we both know they're completely different. There's tons of overhead in cannabis versus software. So it's not even a equal playing field. So as far as the scaling goes, that's gonna be, you need your foundation in place to properly scale and do it with the right data. And in terms of scaling, you also need the right team. You need the right people working with you and not necessarily for you. And I really define this differently and make it a point to speak about, whether I'm speaking in front of the people or just even other people about my team. I use the term we instead of I, because it's truly the team that makes it all happen. And we as a team collectively make this happen. And a lot of the older generations, it would always kind of make me cringe when I'd hear them say, oh, I can do this, my this, my that, my. It's not we, it's not us. And when you're a CEO, when you're an owner speaking in the first person point of view, it makes it seem like everything's coming because of you, and you're ultimately taking the credit for the others. And I understand that that's a strategy by some, but I choose to give credit where credit's due, and I couldn't do what I do without my team. And I say that to say, if you plan to scale your company anywhere past even just getting it to 100K a month in revenue, but especially scaling it past that per month, you're gonna need a solid team in place. And everyone's team is a slight bit different, especially coming from what you as the founder, what your strengths are. So for me, I have more strengths in marketing, in branding, in even sales. So I tend to gravitate more on that side rather than operations, rather than cultivation, rather than manufacturing. Those are somewhat boring and monotonous to me, where it becomes the same routine over and over and over. And you have to be there to make sure that everything is happening and going forward. Whereas branding and marketing, it's more of a vision. It's setting up a strategy, setting up a plan, following out that plan, delegating that plan to the right people, and executing on that plan. And these are more, that's my wheelhouse. And so finding someone that complements that, finding your team that complements where your strengths end is super important. And it's also, it's not about getting a team and amassing a team and building this huge team or nothing. I'd rather have 2 or 3 key people on my team rather than 10 average people. And it's not about settling, just saying, oh, we need this position filled. Let me just throw this label to this person because they're my friend and they know somewhat about that. Because that's gonna backfire. If you just happen to start and someone's running your social media and they're doing a decent job, and then your company starts getting some traction, momentum, and you just be like, okay, you're gonna be chief marketing officer now. But they don't technically have the skills or the background or the experience to truly be a real chief marketing officer. And then what'll happen is they're gonna start looking into it and be like, yeah, I'm the chief marketing officer of Zotix. And they're gonna look up at some point, understand like, well, what is a chief marketing officer? How much do they get paid? Oh, they should be getting paid $200,000 a year. Oh, well, I'm only getting paid $100,000, so I'm getting underpaid. They're taking advantage of me. But when in reality, it's like that label is just applied to you. You don't even know what it is you should be doing. You're not doing it to the fullest. I could go actually pay someone 200 grand and get a real chief marketing officer. So that's why it's dangerous to just apply these C-suite labels to people, especially if they're friends or people that have been working with you for a while. Don't just name them chief strategy officer, chief marketing officer, chief this, chief that, because anytime you put a C in front of any of these terms, it automatically is like a 6-figure increase on pay just because of title. And title doesn't mean results. So you want to pay on results. If you do got to apply a title to somebody, instead of using the chief XYZ, use a director of operations, director of marketing, director of sales. Director still implies that they have the authority to do what they need to do within that market, within that sector. However, it doesn't come with an average salary price tag in the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's one way to avoid confusion, where people become entitled to these C-level positions and you kind of did it to yourself because you just wanted to fill that role and sound cool and like, oh, this is my chief marketing officer. It's gonna come bite you in the ass. So instead, make him the director of marketing if you got to. So next, in terms of scaling, you need your team in place, obviously. You need your foundation. You need systems in place. And these systems allow you to remove yourself as a CEO and allow your team to do what they need to do and not be bottlenecked by your busy schedule, by your clogged up communication. Maybe it takes you a while to get back to them, things like that. So as a founder, as an owner, as a CEO, build systems to delegate as much as possible. So all you have to do is focus on your highest priority values. And I learned this from a mentor of mine who he actually mentors billion-dollar people throughout the world, kings, queens, CEOs, business owners, people we don't even know, and they're multi-billionaires. And so his strategy in life, in business, in life, in anything, is to focus on the highest priority values only. Everything else you want to automate, delegate, or delete. And so focus on your highest priority values, what's going to actually move the needle, what's going to advance the project. Your value doesn't lie in doing busy work, and you can delegate that busy work. It's important to delegate that busy work, and it's important to keep you focused on highest priority values. And that may change. It may change from week to week, month to month, year to year. At most times, highest priority values is going to be somewhat tied to revenue generation, profit building, and ultimately productization of whatever it is you're selling. So at some point in time, as the visionary of the company, you're going to have to really get into these linchpin points and dial out those systems and those situations so that you're maximizing the amount of income, the amount of revenue, the amount of profit that your company is making without having to sacrifice all of your time, all of your focus, all of your energy. And you do that by delegating all the functions to other people and focusing just on what needs to be focused on. And that could even be going to conferences, networking with people, taking trips, exploring new markets, figuring out new products to develop, staying ahead of the curve, what's coming up. And that's why going to certain conferences is key, because you're in rooms with other leaders throughout the world in your respective industry, and you guys are literally shaping the next year, next 2 years, next 5 years, and being there at ground zero, you can have this advanced warning that the rest of the market doesn't have yet. And this really helped me a lot in the early days of legalization back in California. I really started getting interested in it in 2016 and wanted to start a medical collective, and spoke with some lawyers, and they advised me not to do it because the legalization was rolling out in the next year, and they were like, maybe you get a year out of this, but really it's better to just focus on the rec market, on the legal market, which is what I did. And that's how I ended up with one of the early distribution licenses in California. And so day one of legalization in 2018, my distribution license was live, and we were just like everyone else who started that day, who started that year. It was the first year of legalization in California. We're all trying to figure it out. So being early to these conferences, being early, rubbing shoulders with certain people that are making decisions, that are the forward thought leaders of your industry, is super important. And it's also about keeping your ego low. Don't go in there trying to posture and be like, oh, I've sold this much, I've done this, I own this, I do this. The people that speak the least are the ones to really watch out for, and both for good and for bad, because they're the ones just soaking it all up, strategizing, seeing what other people are doing, what they're not doing, what's not serving them well, how they're fucking up. And this is important. So observe rather than talk. And we have all heard this our whole lives, I think, in one way or the other, and it really comes into play in cannabis. So scaling, again, I can do multiple videos on scaling alone, but without these key core principles, there is no scaling. So you need to have your operations in place, your team in place, your systems in place, your forms of delegation, and also minimalization, taking off the plate, taking everything out of the equation that isn't necessary, simplifying it down to its simplest terms. And I know this sounds kind of vague, but it's so powerful when you really apply that to certain things and you pull it apart and understand, like, okay, do we really need this here? Do we really need this? Or can we start with something more basic, dial it in, and then add on more complexity as it grows, and we master these basics. So that's truly a general secret to scaling. I say general because it applies to a lot of different sectors, whether it be cannabis or other business. However, scaling a THCA brand is a bit trickier because First off, you have different states and different laws. So now you have to navigate those. You have to understand those. And if you don't properly navigate these states, it can set you up for some big losses where maybe you're investing a lot into a certain state and then overnight they ban it. So again, this is topics for another video, but in scaling, you want to choose your territories strategically and understand why you're going to focus on scaling in that certain area versus another area. Identify what areas are risky, whether that be low risk or high risk, and then really go heavy in the places where we saw or have seen acceptance. And so it's looking like Florida, Texas. These are some really great places to really up your ante on the THCA businesses, because we see those local governments supporting it and pushing back on licensed cannabis, yet embracing hemp and THCA. So understand what state is doing what their focus are, who's lobbying who, what kind of licensed cannabis conglomerates are already operating in that state. That's going to be a big one for you to understand. Say if Curaleaf's in a state, most likely they're gonna have a lot of pushback against any THCA program. So understand who the big players are in your respective state. Understand what their 5-year term is, what their outlook is, what they're trying to achieve in the next few years. So this is really going to dictate on what states you should focus on scaling. And then worldwide scaling is a completely different story. Way too much to get into in this video. And worldwide scaling can happen both on the hemp side with THCA as well as the licensed cannabis side. And worldwide scaling on the cannabis side works a little bit differently than on the hemp side, but also scaling on the hemp side has more limitations and more risks than just scaling within the United States. Each country has their different protocols. Some countries don't even want American CBD. They want European grown CBD, for instance. So it'd also be about identifying your supply chain producers and how that's going to fit into the equation. So, and that's another good point on scaling, is you need to be able to supply the amount of both raw materials and finished goods in order to properly scale. And you need to do this efficiently. So understanding what your supply chain looks like, are you planning to own any parts of it, or are you just outsourcing it all, is going to be a big play on your strategy and how you scale. And also if you plan to own some of your supply chain, you want to work that into your plan too, and understand, okay, we're just going to be using supply chain partners for this next 2 years before we build out our own facility and bring it all in-house. So these are strategies with scaling. Again, I can't go too deep into it without, every situation is going to be different. So without some context, I can't sit here and give you step-by-step scaling strategies. But what I can do is explain that without the proper foundation, without the proper team, without the proper systems, and without the proper vision and long-term outlook, scaling is going to be impossible. So these are the key things to focus on, the core fundamentals of it. And then I can do other videos in the future on advanced scaling techniques, and also scaling in licensed cannabis versus scaling in hemp, THCA, is 2 completely different things. So again, you're running ultimately 2 separate companies, 2 separate businesses, but they have the same name, same logo, same branding, same marketing, same mission statement. They're just running in 2 parallel supply chains. And so that's really the key to understand, is you don't want to choose one over the other. It's not one that's better than the other. It's about finding the right supply chain partners so you can get the quality that you need. It's super important, because all the marketing, all the advertising, all that stuff doesn't matter if you can't have consistent quality. However, consistent quality isn't what it's all about. It's really about the marketing, the branding, the sales. That's what's really going to build awareness and actually bring paying customers into your ecosystem. So it's kind of like the chicken before the egg. You can't do one without the other. You need the quality and you need the marketing, but you need them at the right time together. And a big part of that is going to be your supply chain partners, which is all part of building out the THCA brand. It's also part of building out the cannabis brand. And if you don't do it right, if you don't work with the right supply chain partners, it can be detrimental. And that's, you know, some of the reasons why you want to eventually own your own supply chain, so you can have that control, that autonomy, that independence. So thanks for watching all these videos. I'm putting this info out to empower everybody who watches them so that you can actually participate in these markets, in the licensed THCA hemp market and also the licensed cannabis market throughout the world. And that's what I'm doing. As you see, I'm out here in Spain. I've been doing a small world tour. I was in Berlin, London, a few different spots in Spain, headed to Marbella tomorrow, and then we'll see where I head next. But this is a classic example of how I'm able to be on the road for a month at a time in other countries, yet I got my team dialed in, work is still taking place, progress is still moving. You see, I'm still filming my videos here. I'm not letting things fall to the side. It's about understanding what you need to do, what your responsibilities are, how you can maneuver that, how I can film my videos on the road. I had to get the right setup. I had to figure out how I can minimize it so I can take it on the plane so it's not too heavy, so it fits in a carry-on. Like all these little things, but once you get that dialed in, now I got my YouTube filming kit with me. I can go wherever in the world with it. So understand how you can remove yourself from these equations so you can be free, you can be moving around, you can be exploring new opportunities, meeting new people, entering new markets, exploring what those risks are firsthand on the ground. It's completely different perspective than trying to do it remotely. It just doesn't work. So wrapping that up, click the link below, book a call with me if you're interested in having me help you set up your THCA or licensed cannabis brand. I've helped numerous amounts of people do it successfully, as well as my two brands, and we operate both in the licensed cannabis side as well as the THCA hemp side. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's not something quick and easy. It's not like just setting up an email account and setting up a new social media and designing some packaging and putting some weed in it. But that's what a lot of people think it is, and that's just like step 1 through 3 out of hundreds of steps. So watch more videos, tap in with me if you want to talk, and I appreciate the support.